I did not hear the servo skull approach. I only felt the change in air pressure, the faint whir of its anti-gravity suspensors, and then the weight of the package it deposited into my hands. Black ceramite, obsidian dark, mirror smooth, heavy in a way that had nothing to do with mass and everything to do with meaning. The pauldron sat in my palms like a headsman's verdict. I stood in the armory of the Crimson Wardens, surrounded by the tools of war that had been my companions for 73 years. Bolt pistols hung in neat rows on their blessed racks. Power swords gleamed under the sacred lumens. The air smelled of consecrated oil and incense, the familiar scent of home, of brotherhood, of everything I had known since the day they implanted the gene seed of Rogel Dawn into my chest and made me more than human. The black pauldron reflected my face back at me, distorted slightly by its curve. In that dark surface, I could see the crimson and gold of my power armor behind me, the colors I had worn with pride through 4 decades of service. The Crimson Warden's heraldry, the crossed blades over a golden sun, was visible in the reflection, wavering like something seen through water, like something already drowning. My hands were shaking. I watched them tremble as if they belonged to someone else. Brother Sergeant Matthias Kane of the 3rd Company, veteran of 27 campaigns, bearer of the Emperor's laurel for valor on Gemenet, did not shake. But the hands holding this black ceramite pauldron shook anyway. Behind me I heard the soft intake of breath that told me I was no longer alone. I did not turn. I did not need to. I knew who had come. They had been waiting for this moment as I had been dreading it. The summons arrived then. Brother Captain Valorian's voice was carefully neutral, but I had served under him for 56 years. I heard what he was not saying. I heard the crack in the foundation of that neutrality. Yes, my lord. My own voice sounded distant, formal, hollow. The Deathwatch has called. The silence that followed felt like falling, like the moment between stepping off a cliff and realizing the ground is gone beneath your feet. In that silence, everything changed. In that silence, I died a little. "How long do we have?" Brother Torin asked. His voice came from my left, rough with something that might have been grief if Space Marines were permitted to grieve. We had fought side by side for 41 years. We had shed blood together on 17 worlds. He had saved my life on Mordian. I had carried him from the field on Armageddon when the orcs shattered his leg. 24 hours. The words tasted like ash. "I am to depart at dawn." More figures entered the armory. I heard their footsteps, recognized the gait of each brother without looking. Khalid, whose precision with a bolter had no equal in the chapter. Young Lucian, barely 3 decades old, who still believed that war was glorious. Brother Chaplain Mordain, whose litanies had guided me through the darkest battles of my service. They gathered around me in a circle, these brothers who had been my entire world. Not speaking, not touching, just present, just there. I finally turned to face them. Captain Valorian's face was carved from stone, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the black pauldron in my hands. He was 312 years old, older than any living member of the chapter, save the dreadnoughts sleeping in the depths. He had watched brothers leave for the Deathwatch before. He had watched them never return. "It is a great honor," he said, and the words sounded like a funeral rite. "Yes, my lord." What else could I say? What other words existed for this moment? Chaplain Mordain stepped forward, his skull-faced helm tucked under one arm, his scarred face weathered by centuries of service. "The Deathwatch is the Imperium's shield against the Xenos threat. To serve in its ranks is to stand in the Emperor's sight, to be recognized as one worthy of the long vigil." I knew the words. Every Space Marine knew them. They were meant to be comforting, inspiring, glorious. They fell flat in the armory's still air. How many return? The question came from Lucien, young and foolish, and brave enough to ask what we were all thinking. No one answered him. I looked down at the black pauldron again. In its surface, I could still see the ghost of my crimson armor reflected, but it was fading. Already, it felt like looking at someone else, someone I used to be, someone who no longer existed. The weight of it increased in my hands. Not physically. The ceramite weighed exactly what ceramite should weigh, but it felt heavier with each passing second, heavy with the weight of names I had heard whispered in the chapter's halls. Brother Sergeant Corvus, sent to the Deathwatch 97 years ago, never seen again. Brother Mathil, gone for 140 years. Brother Tacitus, who returned after 60 years, so changed that his own battle brothers did not recognize him, who spoke only of Xenos horrors and the darkness between stars, who served for 3 more years before falling in battle against the Tyranids, almost grateful for the release. "You will need to have your armor repainted," Valorian said quietly. "The Tech Marines will perform the rites tonight. You should spend your last hours as you see fit." My last hours, as if I were dying, as if this were an execution. Perhaps it was. "I would like to walk the Hall of Ancestors," I said. "One final time." "Of course." Valorian placed a hand on my shoulder, the ceramite of his gauntlet cold even through my armor. "We will accompany you." I nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in my throat. Space Marines were not supposed to feel this way. We were the Emperor's angels of death, gene-forged warriors beyond such mortal weaknesses as fear or sorrow or loss. But I felt them anyway. All of them, everything. I held the black pauldron against my chest and walked from the armory, my brothers falling into step behind me. Their footsteps echoed in the corridor like a funeral march, like the slow, inevitable rhythm of something ending. In 24 hours, I would leave Viridia. I would leave the Crimson Wardens. I would leave everything I had ever known. In 24 hours, Brother Sergeant Matthias Kane would cease to exist, and in his place would stand only a nameless warrior in black armor, serving the long vigil, hunting Xenos in the dark places between stars. The black pauldron felt heavier with every step. The Hall of Ancestors stretched before us like a cathedral of memory. Viridia's pale sun filtered through stained glass windows 50 meters high, casting patterns of crimson and gold across stone walls carved with names. 10,000 years of names. Heroes who had walked these halls before me, who had worn the crimson and gold, who had bled and died for the Emperor and the Imperium. I ran my fingers across the carved letters, feeling the grooves worn smooth by centuries of touch. Brother Captain Harkin, fallen at the siege of Vardus. Brother Castiel, martyred on Cadia. Brother Sergeant Davian, lost to the warp storms of the Maelstrom. Name after name after name, an endless litany of sacrifice stretching back through millennia. Somewhere on these walls, my name would be carved when I fell. But I would not fall here, among my brothers, defending the worlds we had sworn to protect. I would fall somewhere else, wearing black instead of crimson, fighting alongside strangers in battles my chapter would never know about. The thought hollowed me out from the inside. Every warrior carved here died knowing their purpose, Chaplain Mordain said beside me. His voice echoed in the vast chamber. They knew which banner they fought beneath, which oaths bound them, which brothers would carry their memory forward. I turned to look at him. His face, scarred by 3 centuries of war, held something I had never seen there before. Uncertainty, perhaps even fear. "And those sent to the Deathwatch?" I asked. He was silent for a long moment. Then he pointed to a section of wall near the eastern alcove. I had never noticed it before. A smaller chamber, shadowed, where fewer names were carved. The stone here looked different, older, each name followed by the same inscription. Sent to the long vigil. Status unknown. 17 names. 17 Crimson Wardens consumed by the Deathwatch over 10 millennia of service. Some recent, some ancient beyond reckoning. Brother Sergeant Corvus, I read aloud, 97 years ago. He never returned, Mordain said quietly. None of them did. Some died. Some served until they forgot where they came from. Some chose to remain in the black forever. I traced Corvus's name with my fingertips. Tomorrow, my name would be added to this wall. Not in the main hall where heroes were, remembered, but here, in this shadowed alcove, among the lost ones. Come, Mordain placed a hand on my shoulder. We should pray. The reclusium smelled of incense and old stone. Candles burned before the altar where the chapter's most sacred relics were kept. The blade of Viridia, the first armor ever worn by our founder, a fragment of the Emperor's own battle standard recovered from Terra 10,000 years ago. I knelt before these relics and tried to find words for prayer, but they all felt inadequate. Mordain knelt beside me. For a long time, we said nothing. Then he began to speak, his voice low and rough with something that might have been grief. The Emperor asks much of his servants. He asks us to be more than human, to sacrifice our mortal lives for immortal purpose, to give up family, comfort, peace, everything that makes life worth living. And we do it gladly, because we understand the necessity. He paused. But this, to take a warrior from his chapter, from his brothers, to send him into exile and call it honor. Sometimes I wonder if we ask too much. I looked at him, shocked. Chaplains did not speak like this. They did not question. They did not doubt. Do not repeat those words, he said, meeting my eyes. They are meant for you alone, a blessing and a warning. Remember who you were, Matthias. Remember Viridia. Remember us. No matter how long you serve, no matter how many years pass, no matter what horrors you see in the dark, remember the Crimson. His voice cracked on the last word. We prayed together until the candles burned low, and I tried to commit every detail of the reclusium to memory. The way the light fell across ancient stone, the smell of blessed incense, the weight of my chapter's history pressing down from vaulted ceilings. The training halls were empty when we arrived. My brothers had cleared them, giving us space for what needed to be done. Tauren, Khalid, and Lucien stood waiting in the center of the chamber, their armor gleaming crimson under the practice lumens. They held training blades instead of chainswords, but the weight between us was heavier than any weapon. One last time, Sergeant, Tauren said, and there was a tremor in his voice I had never heard before. We fought as we had fought 1,000 times before. Tauren's brutal, straightforward assault, Khalid's surgical precision, Lucien's youthful aggression tempered by growing wisdom. But every strike felt different now. Every parry was goodbye. Every clash of training blades was a conversation we could not have with words. When Tauren's blade struck my pauldron, the crimson one I would lose tomorrow, I felt it like a wound. We fought until exhaustion forced us to stop, and then we stood together in silence, breathing hard, saying nothing because there was nothing left to say. Lucien's eyes were wet. Khalid looked away. Tauren simply placed his hand on my shoulder and squeezed once before walking away. The evening meal in the great hall should have been a celebration. The tables were laden with food. The chapter's banners hung from ancient rafters, and every brother who could attend was present. But the atmosphere felt funereal. Brothers who had fought beside me for decades found excuses to approach, to share a memory, to speak their farewells without calling them farewells. When Chapter Master Valorian rose to speak, the hall fell silent. Tomorrow, Brother Sergeant Matthias Kane will leave us to serve in the Deathwatch. His voice carried across the hall, steady and formal. He goes with our pride, our prayers, and our hope that he will serve the Emperor as faithfully in black as he has served in crimson. He paused, and I saw his jaw tighten. The long vigil is a sacred duty. Those who are called to it carry the honor of their chapter into the dark places where Xenos threaten humanity. They stand watch where others cannot. They sacrifice everything. His voice broke, just for a moment, just long enough for everyone to hear it. They sacrifice everything so that we may endure. He raised his cup, and 300 voices rose with him. To Brother Matthias, to the long vigil, to sacrifice and service. To sacrifice and service, the chapter responded. I stood, cup in hand, looking at faces I had known for decades. Brothers who had bled with me, fought with me, nearly died with me. And I realized Chaplain Mordain was right. This was too much. The Emperor asked too much. But I would go anyway, because that is what we do. That night, in the forges beneath the fortress monastery, I watched the Tech Marines strip away my crimson armor, piece by piece, and paint it black. The warp transit lasted 3 weeks subjective time, though the navigators told me 6 months had passed in real space by the time we translated back into the Materium. I spent those weeks in my cabin aboard the Black Templar strike cruiser Righteous Fury, staring at my armor hanging on its rack. Black where crimson used to be. Silver trim where gold once gleamed. Only my left pauldron remained unchanged, a ghost of red in a sea of darkness. I did not sleep well during that journey. When I closed my eyes, I saw the faces of my brothers. When I opened them, I saw only black ceramite. Watch Fortress Ariok appeared on the viewing screen like a wound in space. Massive, ancient, Gothic spires reaching out from a central hub the size of a hive city, wreathed in the pale light of a dying star. It hung at the edge of the Jericho Reach, a border region where Imperial space met something older and far more dangerous. Even through the reinforced plasteel of the viewing port, the fortress looked cold. The docking procedure took hours. Security protocols layered upon ancient rituals layered upon paranoid screening. By the time I walked down the embarkation ramp into the fortress proper, I felt like I had been peeled apart and examined at the molecular level. The air inside tasted different from Viridia, colder, recycled through systems that had been functioning since before my chapter even existed. The corridors were wide enough for 3 Terminators to walk abreast, their walls decorated with silver skulls and the iconography of the Inquisition. Servo skulls drifted through the shadows, their eye sockets glowing red as they monitored everything. And everywhere, there were Marines in black. They moved through the corridors with purpose, their armor painted in the deep obsidian of the Deathwatch, but each one bore a different heraldry on their left shoulder. I saw the red of the Blood Angels, the blue of the Ultramarines, the bone white of the Mortifactors, the deep green of the Dark Angels. A dozen chapters, perhaps more, all stripped of their original colors, except for that single pauldron. Ghosts. We were all ghosts of who we used to be. A servo skull approached me, its mechanical voice crackling. Brother Sergeant Matthias Kane, formerly of the Crimson Wardens. Report to Watch Captain Artemis in the Command Sanctum. Level Omega, Section 9, Chamber of Vigils. I followed the skull through corridors that seemed to grow darker the deeper we went. The fortress was a labyrinth of ancient stone and newer construction grafted onto bones 10,000 years old. Some sections bore the marks of Xenos weapons, scorch patterns I recognized as Eldar, corrosion that could only be Tyrannid, impact craters from Orc artillery. This place had seen war. This place was war. The Chamber of Vigils was a vast circular room dominated by a hololithic display showing the Jericho Reach and surrounding sectors. Red markers indicated Xenos activity. Yellow showed potential threats. Green marked recently cleansed systems. There was far more red than green. Watch Captain Artemis stood before the display, his back to me. His armor was black like mine, but it bore the weight of centuries. Battle damage repaired and re-repaired. Purity seals so numerous they hung like a cloak. His left pauldron showed the crimson and black of the blood drinkers. But the paint was so faded and scarred I almost did not recognize it. Brother Sergeant Kane. His voice was rough, ancient, carrying the weight of 300 years in the long vigil. He did not turn. You are the 9th Crimson Warden to serve in the Deathwatch. Do you know what happened to the other 8? No, my lord. 6 are dead. 1 serves still, on a watch station in the Ghoul Stars. The last returned to Viridia after 67 years, and died 3 months later in battle, having forgotten how to fight as anything but Deathwatch. Now he turned, and I saw his eyes. Hard, ancient, utterly without warmth. You will likely join one of those 3 categories. The question is which? He studied me with the gaze of a man who had watched thousands of Marines arrive at this fortress, and watched most of them never leave. You served 73 years with your chapter. That is respectable, but it means nothing here. Your tactics mean nothing. Your traditions mean nothing. Your brotherhood means nothing. Here you serve the Imperium. Here you hunt Xenos. Here you learn to fight alongside brothers you do not know, cannot trust, and will likely watch die. He paused. Or you will die first, and they will forget your name before your body cools. I understand, my lord. No, you do not. But you will. He gestured to a tech priest waiting in the shadows. Take him to the apothecarian. Complete the rites of induction. The apothecarian was cathedral and butcher's shop combined. Dozens of surgical bays lined the walls, each attended by red-robed tech priests chanting binary cant. The air smelled of sacred oils and disinfectant. In the center of the room stood a throne of dark metal, surrounded by servo arms holding brushes and sealant guns. Remove your armor, the lead tech priest commanded, his voice augmented by Vox speakers implanted in his throat. Piece by piece, I stripped away the black ceramite that had been crimson just days before. Breastplate, pauldrons, both of them now, the crimson left shoulder joining its black counterpart. Vambraces, greaves, until I stood in just my black body glove, feeling naked in a way that had nothing to do with clothing. They mounted each piece on the throne and began their work. Brushes moved with mechanical precision, painting over every trace of crimson with deeper black. Enamel so dark it seemed to drink the light. The tech priests chanted as they worked, litanies to the Omnissiah and prayers to the Emperor, consecrating each stroke. I watched them paint over the Crimson Warden's iconography on my breastplate. The crossed blades disappeared beneath black. The golden sun faded into shadow. Stroke by stroke, Brother Sergeant Matthias Kane of the 3rd Company was erased. Only my left pauldron remained crimson. A ghost. A memory. A lie I could tell myself about who I used to be. When they finished, they gave me a new bolter. Not the weapon I had carried for 70 years, but a Deathwatch pattern stalker with specialized ammunition for killing Xenos. They gave me new oaths, spoken before an altar decorated with alien skulls. They gave me a new squad designation, Kill Team Sword. They did not give me back my name. You are Deathwatch now, the tech priest said as I donned the black armor. You belong to the Imperium. You hunt monsters in the dark places where even space marines fear to tread. You will fight. You will bleed. You will die. But you will die knowing you served humanity's survival. I looked at my reflection in a polished section of wall. Black armor, silver trim. One crimson pauldron like a wound that would not heal. I did not recognize the warrior looking back at me. The Imperium hunts monsters, and I was its hound. Kill Team Sword assembled in the mission briefing chamber 48 hours after my induction. 5 warriors in black armor, each bearing a different chapter's heraldry on their left shoulder, each carrying the weight of service I was only beginning to understand. Brother Sergeant Valen was Raven Guard, his armor marked by 80 years of service in the Deathwatch. He stood at the head of the tactical display, silent as a shadow, his pale face scarred in ways that spoke of battles too terrible to discuss. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, and everyone leaned in to hear. Brother Halfdan represented the Space Wolves, though he had lost most of their characteristic exuberance. His armor bore kill markings in such numbers they overlapped each other. His eyes held something that might have been called sadness, if such a word could apply to Fenrisian warriors. He spoke of saga and honor, but the words sounded hollow. Brother Krios wore the black and white cross of the Black Templars on his shoulder, and his faith burned with an intensity that made even his silence feel like prayer. He carried a power sword inscribed, with litanies so extensive they covered every centimeter of the blade. When he spoke, it was always in scripture. Brother Tarius was ultramarine, and his tactical brilliance showed in every movement, every position he took in the formation. But there was something defeated in his eyes, a knowledge that tactics could only delay certain outcomes, never prevent them. And now, there was me, Crimson Wardens, the newest, the one who had not yet learned what the others already knew. "Hive world goal," Valen said, his whisper cutting through the chamber like a blade. "Population 16 billion. Manufactorum output critical to the sector's war effort, and infested." He activated the hololith. Images of grotesque xenos appeared. Genestealers, their forearms ending in diamond-hard claws, their skulls elongated and eyeless. 3 months ago, productivity in the lower hives dropped by 18%. 2 months ago, workers began disappearing. Last month, an administratum census revealed that entire hab blocks had gone silent. "Genestealers," Krios said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "The vanguard of the Great Devourer." Yes, and by the time the local authorities realized what they were dealing with, the infection had spread too far to contain through conventional means. Valen's pale eyes swept over us. "Our mission is simple. Descend into Underhive 7. Locate the Broodlord. Kill everything between us and it. Cauterize the infestation before it compromises the entire hive." Simple. The word was a lie, and we all knew it. The drop pod burned through Goal's polluted atmosphere like a falling star. The impact when we hit the Underhive's upper levels drove my teeth together hard enough to crack mortal bone. The doors blew open with explosive charges, and we emerged into hell. The air tasted like poison, thick with industrial waste and something else, something organic and wrong that made my enhanced senses recoil. The Underhive stretched before us in all directions, a maze of rusted corridors and failing lumens, inhabited by those too poor or too worthless to live in the levels above. We moved in tactical formation, Valen at point, Tarius calling out directions based on schematics that were 3 centuries out of date. The deeper we descended, the worse it became. The corridors grew narrower, the ceiling pressed down. The walls wept with condensation that smelled of decay. "Contact!" Halfdan growled, raising his bolter. They came from the darkness ahead. Not Genestealers, not yet. Humans. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Their eyes reflected our lumens with an alien purple sheen. Their movements were too fast, too coordinated. Their mouths hung open in silent screams as they charged. Fourth-generation hybrids, Torius said calmly. Still human enough to move through society undetected, infected enough to serve the brood mind. The Emperor delivers them to us for cleansing, Kreos replied, and opened fire. The corridor became an abattoir. Bolt rounds tore through infected flesh. Bodies fell in heaps that the ones behind simply climbed over. They came at us with improvised weapons. Pipes, chains, tools converted into instruments of slaughter. They came with their bare hands, their purple eyes gleaming with something that might have been hunger or hate or the complete absence of either. They came, and we killed them. I saw her in the press of bodies. Small, perhaps 10 years old. Her dress was torn and filthy, her blonde hair matted with grime. But her eyes were purple, glowing with that alien corruption, and her fingers had split open to reveal bone-white claws growing from beneath her fingernails. She ran at me with inhuman speed. I raised my bolter. My finger found the trigger. Time seemed to slow, stretching the moment into something eternal and terrible. I could see the intelligence behind those purple eyes. Not human intelligence anymore, but something cold and calculating and utterly alien wearing a child's face. I pulled the trigger. The mass-reactive shell caught her in the chest. Her small body jerked backward, then crumpled to the rusted deck like a broken doll. Purple blood pooled beneath her, steaming in the cold air. I stared at what I had done, at the small form lying motionless, at the childhood stolen by Xenos corruption, at the mercy I had delivered through violence. A hand fell on my shoulder. Violen stood beside me, his pale face expressionless. He said nothing. He did not need to. His eyes spoke volumes. This is what we do. This is the Deathwatch. This is the price of humanity's survival. We pushed deeper into the Underhive, leaving bodies in our wake. We found the Genestealers in the water recycling plants, exactly where Torius predicted they would be. Dozens of them. Pure strains, perfect killing machines bred by the Tyrannid hive fleets. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, we had killed 43 Genestealers, the Broodlord, and approximately 700 infected humans in various stages of xenobiological corruption. When we emerged from the Underhive, our armor was black with more than paint. In the dropship returning to Eriok, none of us spoke. Halfdan cleaned his weapons with mechanical precision. Kreos prayed silently. Torius reviewed tactical data. Valen simply sat with his eyes closed, and I wondered what he was seeing in the darkness behind them. I closed my own eyes and saw purple light reflected in a child's gaze. This is what we do. This is the Deathwatch. The dream stopped after goal. I no longer saw the child with purple eyes when I closed my own. Instead, I saw nothing. The blackness behind my eyelids was complete, mercifully empty. I do not know if this was a blessing or simply the first step in the erosion that I had watched in the eyes of my brothers in Kill Team Sword. 6 more missions followed in the months after the Underhive. 6 different worlds, 6 different Xenos, threats. 6 different lessons in what it meant to serve the long vigil. On the feral world of Cragmore, we hunted orc weirdboys who were opening warp rifts with their psychic screaming. Halfdan taught me to track them by scent alone, not just the reek of greenskin filth, but the particular burnt ozone smell that clung to psychers who channeled too much of the immaterium through their flesh. We found them in caves deep beneath the volcanic wastes, their heads swollen to twice normal size, their eyes bleeding warp light. The stench of their deaths stayed in my armor for weeks. At the Webway Gate on Shrine World Lysara, We purged Eldar corsairs who had been raiding Imperial pilgrims for sport. Brother Krios's prayers before that battle were particularly fervent, his litanies rising to near screaming as we prepared to face the alien. I found myself joining him, the words unfamiliar on my tongue but somehow necessary. The Emperor protects, the Emperor provides, the Emperor will judge the Xenos and find them wanting. When we breached the Webway Gate, the Eldar fought with grace and precision that made me understand why they had once ruled the galaxy. But grace and precision mean nothing against faith, backed by bolter fire. On the agri-world of Prandium, we burned Tau infiltrators from positions they had held for 3 years, slowly converting Imperial citizens to their ideology of the greater good. Tarius's tactical genius saved us that day. He predicted every ambush, every fallback position, every desperate counterattack. His mind worked 3 steps ahead of the enemy, seeing patterns in their movements that the rest of us could not perceive. When the last Tau fire warrior fell, Tarius simply nodded and began calculating ammunition expenditure for his report. With each mission, the bonds between us grew deeper. Not the brotherhood I had known with the Crimson Wardens, that had been forged in shared tradition, in oaths spoken in the same halls, in colors worn, with collective pride. This was something different, harder, colder, but no less real. Halfdan told me stories of Fenris during long transits between warp jumps, his voice growing softer with each tale, as if the words were precious things he was slowly running out of. Krios shared his personal litanies, teaching me prayers that were not in any official Imperial text, but had sustained him through 40 years of service. Valen rarely spoke, but when he did, we all listened, because his whispered words carried the weight of 8 decades hunting Xenos in the dark, and Tarius. Tarius was the tactical anchor around which we all orbited. His brilliance was not just in combat planning, but in understanding each of us, deploying our strengths, compensating for our weaknesses. He knew when Halfdan needed to be unleashed, and when he needed to be restrained. He knew when Krios's faith would make him reckless, and positioned the rest of us to cover him. He knew Valen's preferred approach, vectors, and my still developing instincts. He knew us, and we trusted him to know us. The mission to Karathis should have been routine. Dark Eldar raiders had struck at an industrial complex on the southern continent, taking slaves for whatever torments they inflicted in the dark city of Komara. We were to intercept them before they could escape back into the Webway. We found their raiding party in the ruins of a manufactorum. The battle was vicious, close quarters fighting through smoke and shadows. The Dark Eldar moved like liquid violence, their weapons delivering agonies beyond anything I had experienced. We killed 17 of them, but when the smoke cleared and we counted heads, Tarius was gone. We searched for 3 days. 3 days following trails through the Webway fragments the Dark Eldar had left behind. 3 days knowing with increasing certainty what we would find. When we finally breached their torture chambers, we found what the homunculi had left of Brother Tarius. I will not describe what they had done to him. I will not commit those images to record. Some horrors are too great to be spoken aloud, even among those who have seen the worst the galaxy can offer. We recovered his gene seed. We recovered his armor. We did not recover anything that could be called Brother Tarius. The funeral was held in Watch Fortress Eriok's Chapel of Fallen Heroes. Watch Captain Artemis delivered the eulogy, speaking of duty and sacrifice and service to the Emperor. His words were formal, ritualistic, appropriate. They meant nothing. Krios wept. I had never seen a Space Marine weep before. His tears cut channels through the grime on his face, and his shoulders shook with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his gene-enhanced chest. His faith, that burning, absolute faith that had sustained him through decades of horror, cracked like ceramite under a power fist. "We are supposed to be his angels," Kreos whispered, his voice broken. "We are supposed to be beyond such deaths. Why does he allow this? Why does he permit the Xenos to inflict such suffering on those who serve him faithfully?" No one answered. There was no answer. Brother Gaius arrived 2 weeks later, young, barely 50 years old, fresh from the Ultramarines' 5th Company, with his blue and gold still bright on his left pauldron. Watch Captain Artemis assigned him to Kill Team Sword to replace Torias. He was competent, skilled, everything an Ultramarine should be. He studied the Codex Astartes with appropriate reverence. He followed orders precisely. He integrated into our tactical formations with professional efficiency. But he was not Torias. He would never be Torias. We returned to the war. Another mission. Then another. The Deathwatch's appetite for warriors was endless. Its need for Xenos blood insatiable. We fought. We bled. We killed. And slowly I began to understand the truth that Varlin and Halfdan and even Kreos had learned long before me. The Deathwatch does not just hunt Xenos. It consumes those who serve it. Mission by mission, year by year, brother by brother. It takes everything you are and burns it as fuel for humanity's survival. Your traditions, your bonds, your faith, your very identity. All of it fed into the fire of the long vigil until nothing remains but black armor and the weight of duty. Torias was gone. Someday, Halfdan would be gone. Then Kreos, then Varlin, then me. And new brothers would take our places, wearing the same black armor, hunting the same Xenos horrors, dying the same terrible deaths. The wheel would turn, the Deathwatch would endure, and we would be forgotten. The ruins on Death World Varsavia predated human civilization by millions of years, perhaps longer. The Margos xenoarchaeologies who discovered them could not identify their origin. Not Eldar, not Orc, not even the cold geometries of Necron construction. They were something else, something older, something that had existed when the galaxy was young and gods still walked among the stars. Watch Captain Artemis sent Kill Team Sword to investigate. The planet itself was hostile in ways that made even a Space Marine's enhanced physiology struggle. Gravity 1.4 times Terra standard. Atmosphere thick with spores from fungal forests that could digest ceramite given enough time. Predators in the undergrowth that had evolved to hunt creatures far larger and more dangerous than us. The ruins rose from the jungle like broken teeth, black stone that seemed to drink light, covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. "I do not like this," Halfdan said, his enhanced senses twitching. "The air tastes wrong, like lightning before a storm, but worse. Colder." Kreos made the sign of the Aquila. His faith had not recovered from Torias' death, but he clung to it anyway, like a drowning man clutching driftwood. "The Emperor protects." "The Emperor is very far away," Vaylin whispered, his pale eyes scanning the ruins. "And this place is very old." We descended into the structure through an entrance partially collapsed by time. Our Auspex readings made no sense. Electromagnetic fields that spiked and vanished. Temperature readings that jumped from freezing to boiling in seconds. Gravitational anomalies that should not have been possible outside a ship's failing Geller field. The deeper we went, the worse it became. The corridors were perfect geometric impossibilities, angles that my eyes refused to properly process, walls that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the 3 I could perceive. Halfdan's breathing grew labored, his enhanced physiology struggling against something in the air that was not chemical or biological, but something else entirely. We found it in a chamber at the heart of the ruins. The Citan shard hung suspended in a prison of living metal, its form constantly shifting between states of matter and energy. One moment it appeared humanoid, 9 meters tall, made of light so bright it should have blinded us. The next moment it was a swirling mass of geometric shapes that hurt to perceive. Then something else entirely. Something that had no name because human language had not evolved words for what it was. A fragment of a star god. A shard of a being that had devoured suns and reshaped reality for its amusement when the universe was young. And it was waking up. Fall back. Valen's whisper was urgent for the first time in all the months I had known him. Now! We cannot... The prison shattered. Reality broke with it. I cannot properly describe what happened next. Human perception is not equipped to process the transformation of fundamental physical laws. I saw Halfdan raise his bolter, saw him fire, saw the mass-reactive shells transform into butterflies made of frozen time that fluttered backward into the barrel. I saw the walls become liquid, then gas, then something that was neither. I saw my own hands aging and youthing simultaneously. Flesh becoming dust, becoming flesh again in cycles that happened too fast to follow. The Citan shard laughed. The sound was not audible. It bypassed ears entirely and resonated directly in the structure of reality itself. Matter responded to that laughter, dancing to frequencies that should not exist. Halfdan died first. The Citan looked at him. If looked is even the correct word for what that being did, and lightning that was not electricity but pure transformation erupted from its form. Brother Halfdan of the Space Wolves, who had served in the Deathwatch for 37 years, who had survived 100 battles against the galaxy's most terrible Xenos, simply ceased to exist. His atoms scattered, his essence unmade. There was not even ash to mark where he had stood. Krios screamed and charged, his power sword raised, his faith burning brighter than it had since Torias died. The Citan gestured almost dismissively, and Krios's armor melted. Not from heat, from the fundamental alteration of its molecular bonds. Ceramite flowed like water, fusing with the flesh beneath. Krios fell, his screams taking on a wet, bubbling quality as his lungs struggled to function while partially bonded with liquefied plasteel. Gaius fired his bolter until the magazine was empty, then drew his combat knife and charged. The Citan reached out and touched him. Just touched him. Gaius aged 1,000 years in 3 seconds. His enhanced flesh withered, his bones turned to powder, his armor collapsed around a corpse that had died of extreme old age before it hit the ground. I raised my own weapon, knowing it was useless, knowing we were all about to die, knowing that this was how it ended. Vaporized by a god from the universe's childhood, our service meaningless, our sacrifice forgotten. Valen moved between us and the Citan. His voice was steady when he spoke. Calm, perhaps even grateful. 80 years is enough. I saw him pull the vortex grenade from his belt, saw him activate it, saw the expression on his pale face. Not fear, not despair, but something that looked almost like relief. Tell my chapter I served with honor, he said. Then he triggered the grenade. The vortex opened. A tear in reality that made the Citan's reality warping look like children's tricks. It dragged everything toward its infinite hunger. Air, matter, light, the Citan shard's screaming form, and Brother Sergeant Valen of the Raven Guard. I ran. Krios crawled, dragging his half-melted body through corridors that were collapsing back into normal geometry. We reached the surface as the entire ruin complex imploded behind us, dragged into whatever hell dimension the vortex grenade had opened. The extraction shuttle found us 3 hours later. Krios died during the flight back to Ariok, despite everything the apothecaries tried. His last words were prayers, but they sounded more like questions. Watch Captain Artemis met me in the landing bay. He looked at what remained of Kill Team's sword. Just me, alone, covered in Krios's blood. and his ancient eyes showed no surprise. Brother Sergeant Valen was the last surviving member of his chapter, Artemis said quietly. The Raven Guard's successor, known as the Shadow Talons, was declared extinct 193 years ago, destroyed fighting the Tyranids at the Battle of Aurar's Sepulchre. He chose to remain in the Deathwatch rather than transfer to another chapter. He had no home to return to. He had only the long vigil. I stared at him, understanding crystallizing like ice in my chest. "How long?" I asked. "How long until I become him?" Artemis placed a hand on my shoulder. "You already are, brother. You just have not realized it yet." He was right. The years that followed blurred together like ink in water. Missions became indistinguishable from one another. Different worlds, different Xenos, different brothers wearing the same black armor. I stopped counting. After the 30-second deployment, the numbers ceased to matter. Only the work remained. Kill Team Sword was dissolved after Varsavia. There was only me left to dissolve. They assigned me to Kill Team Talon, then Vengeance, then Guillotine, then others whose names I no longer clearly remember. Brothers came and went. Some returned to their chapters when their vigil ended. Most did not. I learned to stop learning their names until they had survived at least 3 missions. It hurt less that way. 73 years I served in the Deathwatch. 73 years of hunting Xenos in the dark places between stars. Longer than I had ever served the Crimson Wardens. The realization came to me one night in my cell aboard Watch Fortress Eriok, and I sat in the darkness for hours trying to understand what it meant. I had been Deathwatch longer than I had been Crimson Warden. Which one was I now? My left pauldron provided no answer. The Crimson had faded over the decades, chipped away by bolter rounds and plasma fire and the claws of creatures whose names existed in no Imperial records. The crossed blades of my chapter's heraldry were barely visible beneath the scars. Sometimes, when the fortress's lumens caught it at certain angles, I would see a flash of red and think, is that the right shade? Was it darker? Brighter? I could not remember anymore. The messages from Viridia came irregularly, delayed by years due to warp travel and the Deathwatch's constant redeployment. I read them in my cell, alone, feeling like I was reading about strangers. Chaplain Mordain had fallen in battle against the forces of chaos. He died as he had lived, speaking prayers with his last breath. I remembered his scarred face in the Reclusium, his voice breaking as he told me to remember the Crimson. I wondered if he had known even then that memory would not be enough. Chapter Master Valorian had been gravely wounded defending Viridia from an Orc War. He had chosen internment in a dreadnought sarcophagus rather than death. I thought of him sleeping in that metal tomb, waking only for battle, and wondered if his dreams were as empty as mine had become. Brother Tauren had fallen on Armageddon during the Third War. A heroic death, the message said. He had held a breach in the hive walls for 6 hours against endless greenskin hordes. They found his body surrounded by orc corpses piled 3 meters high. Brother Khalid died hunting Tyranid infiltrators in the eastern fringe. Precision until the end. His last kill shot had taken the head off a lictor at 400 meters. Young Lucian, who had been barely 3 decades old when I left, had fallen to chaos on some world whose name I did not recognize. The message was brief, clinical. It did not say if he had died loyal or if corruption had claimed him before the end. I chose to believe he died well. My brothers, my chapter, my past. All of it slipping away like water through fingers I could no longer feel. New recruits arrived at Eriok regularly, fresh from their chapters, their left pauldrons bright with colors they still believed defined them. I watched them stare at their black armor with the same horror I had once felt. saw them clutch their chapter's heraldry like drowning men clutching wreckage. They reminded me of someone I used to be, but I could no longer remember his face clearly. I tried to offer guidance when they asked for it, but I had little comfort to give. "The Deathwatch consumes you," I wanted to tell them. "Slowly, completely, until you forget what you were and remember only what you kill." But I said nothing. They would learn, as I had learned, as Valen had learned before me. Watch Captain Artemis died in my 41st year of service. His body was never recovered. The Eldar Harlequins responsible for his death vanished back into the webway, laughing as they went. Watch Captain Theron took his place. He served for 19 years before a Tyranid Carnifex tore him in, half during a boarding action. Watch Captain Draken came next, then Watch Captain Mordred, then others whose names and faces blurred together in my memory. They changed. I remained. The rituals of Watch Fortress Eriok became more familiar than those of the Crimson Wardens. I knew the prayer cycles of the Chapel of Fallen Heroes better than I remembered the litanies of Viridia. I knew the maintenance schedules of the armory, the watch rotations of the fortress guards, the names of tech priests who had served here longer than some chapters had existed. My thoughts structured themselves in terms of Azino's classification, threat assessment, tactical approach vectors. When I saw a new world on a mission briefing, I did not think of its beauty or its people or its place in the Imperium's grand design. I thought only of terrain advantages, potential ambush points, extraction routes if the mission went wrong. The Deathwatch had not just changed me, it had become me. One day I realized I could not remember the last time I had thought of myself as a Crimson Warden, could not recall when I had stopped mentally correcting people who called me Brother Matthias of the Deathwatch instead of Brother Matthias of the Crimson Wardens. The distinction had eroded so gradually I had not noticed its passing. I stood in the armory one night, alone, staring at my reflection in a polished section of wall. Black armor, silver trim, a left pauldron that might have once been crimson, but was now more bare ceramite than paint, more scar tissue than heraldry. The warrior looking back at me was a stranger, ancient eyes in a face that had not aged physically, but had accumulated weight that had nothing to do with years. The eyes of a man who had watched too many brothers die, who had killed too many Xenos, who had forgotten how to be anything other than a weapon. I removed my left pauldron and held it in my hands, trying to remember what it had looked like when it was new, trying to remember the pride I had felt wearing those colors, trying to remember Brother Sergeant Matthias Kane of the 3rd Company. Crimson Wardens who had walked into this fortress 73 years ago believing he would someday return home. That man was dead. He had died slowly, mission by mission, year by year, until nothing remained but black armor and duty. I was Deathwatch now, only Deathwatch, and I would be until I fell. The summons arrived on a morning like any other. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a data slate delivered by a servo skull while I was cleaning my bolter in the armory, performing the maintenance rituals I had performed 10,000 times before. The skull's mechanical voice was flat, indifferent to the weight of its message. Brother Matthias Kane, formerly of the Crimson Wardens. Priority communication from Chapter Master Hadrian Valoris, Crimson Wardens, Viridia. I stared at the data slate for a long time before activating it. The name meant nothing to me, Hadrian Valoris. I searched my memory and found no record of him. He had not been born when I left. He had not existed when I walked away from Viridia 78 years ago. The message was formal, ritualistic, composed in the high Gothic reserved for matters of chapter significance. Brother Matthias Kane, your service to the Deathwatch has been exemplary. Your vigil is complete. In recognition of 78 years of faithful service to the Imperium, You are hereby recalled to the Crimson Wardens with full honors. Your brothers await your return. The Emperor protects. I read it 3 times, then a 4th. The words made sense individually, but strung together they formed a concept I could no longer process. Return. Home. Brothers. I felt nothing. No joy at the prospect of seeing Viridia again. No relief that the long vigil was ending. No eagerness to don crimson and gold once more. Just a hollow uncertainty that sat in my chest like a stone. I should have been grateful. I should have been elated. 78 years was an extraordinary length of service for the Deathwatch. Most served between 5 and 20 years before returning to their chapters or falling in battle. I had survived nearly 8 decades. I should have considered myself blessed. Instead, I stood in the armory, staring at the message, and realized I did not know who Brother Matthias Kane of the Crimson Wardens was anymore. That man had died decades ago. He had died in the underhive of Goal when he pulled the trigger on a child with purple eyes. He had died in the ruins of Varsavia when he watched Varlans sacrifice himself. He had died on 48 worlds in battles against Xenos, whose names existed in no imperial records. What remained was something else. A weapon honed by the long vigil. A hunter who knew only the endless war against the alien. A warrior in black armor who had forgotten what it felt like to be anything else. Could that warrior return to Viridia? Could he walk the Hall of Ancestors and feel anything but the ghosts of brothers he barely remembered? Could he fight alongside young warriors who saw him as legend rather than brother? Could he remove the black armor that had become his skin and don crimson that would feel like a costume borrowed from a dead man? I did not know. And that uncertainty was more terrifying than any Xenos I had faced. I requested an audience with Watch Captain Theron. He received me in the Chamber of Vigils, standing before the hololithic display, showing red markers scattered across the Jericho Reach, like droplets of blood. Brother Matthias, he did not turn. I received word of your recall. The Crimson Wardens are fortunate to have such a hero returning to their ranks. I wish to delay my departure, I said. One final mission before I return. Now he turned, his ancient eyes studying me with an expression I had seen before. He had worn the black for 147 years. He understood what I was not saying. What did you have in mind? Space Hulk Eternal Hunger. I read the threat assessment report yesterday. Genestealer infestation. Patriarch confirmed. The Ordo Xenos has declared it a priority target. It is also a death trap. We have lost 3 kill teams attempting reconnaissance alone. The Hulk's geometry is impossible. The Genestealer numbers are in the thousands. The Patriarch has been breeding for decades, perhaps centuries. Yes. He was quiet for a long moment. This is a suicide mission, brother. I am aware. And you volunteer anyway. I do. He studied me, and I saw understanding dawn in his eyes. He knew why I was asking. He knew what I was running from. Or perhaps what I was running toward. Very well. I will approve your request, but you will not go alone. I am assigning the newest members of Kill Team Obsidian to accompany you. Brothers Kyril, Dante, and Mordain. Young warriors. Eager. Still proud of their chapter colors. I understood, immediately. He was giving me witnesses. Or perhaps students. Brothers who still believed they would return to their chapters someday, who had not yet learned what the long vigil truly cost. Thank you, my lord. Do not thank me, Brother Matthias. I am sending them to learn a lesson. Whether they survive it. He gestured to the red markers on the display. The galaxy will decide. I met the 3 brothers in the briefing chamber the next day. Brother Kyril wore the blue and white of the Howling Griffins. Brother Dante bore the green and gold of the angels of redemption. Brother Mordaine's left pauldron showed the silver and black of the steel confessors. All of them had been in the Deathwatch less than 2 years. Their armor was still bright, their heraldry still crisp and clear. They looked at me with something between respect and fear. To them, I was legend, the Ancient One, the warrior who had served longer than some of them had been alive. They did not understand that legends are just men who have survived too long. Space Hulk Eternal Hunger, I began, activating the hololithic display. The massive derelict appeared, a twisted amalgamation of ships from a dozen different eras fused together by warp exposure. Genestealer infestation, estimated population between 4,000 and 7,000. Patriarch confirmed in the central vessel, an ancient Imperial battleship from the Great Crusade era. Our mission, Brother Chiral asked, his voice eager. Kill the Patriarch, purge the infestation, do not die. In that order? Dante's attempt at humor fell flat. I looked at each of them in turn. Young, brave, still believing the stories they had been told about glory and honor and the righteousness of their cause. This mission will likely kill us all, I said quietly. The odds of survival are negligible. The tactical advantages are non-existent. We will be fighting in close quarters against an enemy that has had centuries to prepare its territory. We will be outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Then why are we going? Mordain asked. I could have told them it was duty. I could have quoted scripture about the Emperor's will and humanity's survival. I could have given them the comfortable lies that watch captains use to send warriors to their deaths. Instead, I told them the truth. Because someone must. Because the Patriarch will breed an army if left unchecked. Because the Deathwatch hunts monsters in the dark, and this is a monster that needs hunting. I paused. And because I want you to understand what this life costs before you give too much of yourselves to it. They did not understand. Not yet. But they would. The boarding torpedoes punched through the Space Hulk's corroded hull like spear tips through rotted flesh. The impact threw us against our restraints hard enough to crack mortal bones. The doors blew open with explosive charges, and we emerged into absolute darkness. The air inside Eternal Hunger was wrong. Dead, it tasted of centuries-old decay and something else. Something organic and malevolent that made even my enhanced senses recoil. Our Auspex readings were chaos, electromagnetic interference, gravitational anomalies, biosigns registering in the thousands, layered throughout the Hulk's impossible geometry, like a cancer metastasizing through dying tissue. Emperor, protect us, Brother Chiral whispered, making the sign of the Aquila. He will, I said, though I did not believe it. Stay close, watch your corners, trust nothing. We moved through corridors that had once been proud Imperial vessels, but had been fused together by warp exposure into a labyrinth of madness. The walls wept with condensation. The deck plates were slick with something that might have been moisture, or might have been the Hulk itself, sweating in anticipation. Our boots made no sound. Even ceramite seemed muted here, as if the darkness was drinking the sound. They came at us in the first hour. Genestealers erupted from ventilation shafts, from wall panels, from ceiling ducts we had not even noticed. Pure strains, perfect killers bred by the Tyrannid hive fleets, their forearms ending in diamond-hard claws, their skulls elongated and eyeless, tracking us by senses humanity had never evolved. Brother Dante fell in the first assault. A Genestealer dropped from above, its claws punching through the weak point where his gorget met his breastplate. His scream lasted 3 seconds before his throat filled with blood. We killed the creature, but Dante was already gone, his gene seed lost in this tomb, where no apothecary would ever recover it. We pushed deeper. The Hulk fought us every step. Corridors that should have led forward instead looped back on themselves. Doors sealed shut by time or malice. Gravity fluctuating between crushing weight and 0 G in the span of heartbeats. And always, the Genestealers came. Brother Kirill died on the second day. We were moving through what had once been a cargo bay when they swarmed us. Dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, their chittering filling the air like insect song. Kirill held a choke point while we fell back, his bolter speaking its hymn of death until the ammunition ran dry. Then his combat knife. Then his hands. When they finally pulled him down, he was still fighting, still killing, still serving. His screams echoed through the Hulk for hours afterward. On the third day, only Brother Kyle and I remained. He was young, barely 40 years old, a salamander whose left pauldron still burned with the green and gold of Nocturne. He spoke of his homeworld during our brief moments of respite, of mountains that breathed fire, of craftsmen who shaped metal with artistry as much as skill, of people who remembered that space marines had once been human. "I will return there someday," he said, his voice hoarse from days without proper rest. "I will walk in the fires of Mount Deathfire and know I served with honor." I said, "Nothing." I had learned not to promise futures that would never come. We found the Patriarch in the heart of the Hulk, in what had once been the bridge of an ancient battleship from the Great Crusade. The chamber was vast, cathedral-like, its ceiling lost in shadows that moved with their own life. And in the center, sitting upon a throne constructed from fused human bones and corroded metal, was the thing that had bred an army in the darkness. The Patriarch was immense, 4 meters tall, 4 arms ending in claws that looked like they could rend ceramite. Its skull was swollen with psychic power, pulsing with a purple light that hurt to look at directly. Its presence in my mind was like acid, burning through my mental defenses, showing me visions of endless hunger, of worlds consumed, of humanity reduced to biomass for the great devouring. It looked at us, and it laughed. The sound was not audible but psychic, resonating directly in our consciousness. The laughter of a creature that had lived for centuries, that had bred thousands of its children, that knew we were already dead. Kyle charged. His faith and his fury overrode tactical sense, and he flew at the Patriarch with his thunderhammer raised high, screaming prayers to Vulcan and the Emperor. The Patriarch moved faster than anything that size should have been able to move. Its claws caught Kyle mid-leap, puncturing his armor, breaking his ribs, tearing through enhanced organs that should have been able to withstand anything. But Kyle did not let go. Even as the Patriarch lifted him, even as its claws sank deeper into his flesh, Kyle wrapped his arms around the creature's neck and held on with all the strength of his salamander gene seed. "Now!" he screamed, blood pouring from his mouth. "For the Emperor, now!" I did not think, did not plan, did not calculate odds. I simply moved. My power sword found my hand. My legs carried me forward, and I drove the blade through the Patriarch's skull with every ounce of strength my ceramite-clad body could generate. The psychic scream nearly killed me. In that final instant as the Patriarch died, I felt its consciousness expand, reaching out to touch the greater hive mind light years away. I felt the infinite hunger, the absolute indifference to individual life, the certainty that no matter how many we killed, no matter how long we fought, the Tyranids would keep coming. Wave after wave after wave, consuming everything, until the galaxy was nothing but biomass for their endless appetite. I understood then. The Deathwatch did not exist to win. Victory was impossible. We existed to delay the inevitable, to buy humanity one more day, one more year, one more century. We were not warriors. We were a sacrifice repeated endlessly, our deaths purchasing time for people who would never know our names. Kyle died in my arms. His last words were about Nocturne, about fire and forge and home. I crawled from the space hulk alone. The extraction shuttle found me 3 days later, drifting in the wreckage field. My armor breached in 17 places, my body more scar tissue than flesh. When Watch Captain Theron asked if I was ready to return to the Crimson Wardens, I gave him my answer. No, my lord, my vigil continues. There was nothing left to return to. Brother Matthias Kane of the Crimson Wardens had died decades ago. Only Deathwatch remained. The years that followed the eternal hunger became a river I could no longer distinguish from the ocean it fed. 147 years in the Deathwatch. 147 years of watching brothers arrive at Watch Fortress Arioch with fear in their eyes and colors on their shoulders. 147 years of watching most of them leave in caskets or not leave at all. I became what Valen had been, what Artemis had been before him, an ancient presence in the fortress corridors, silent as shadow, speaking only when necessary. New recruits learned to recognize me by the scars on my left pauldron, that faded ghost of crimson that marked me as one who had served longer than most chapters had existed. Watch Captain Theron eventually fell in battle against an Eldar Wraith Lord. His replacement, Watch Captain Severus, lasted 34 years before the Tyranids took him. Then came Watch Captain Hadrian, then Korvax, then others whose names joined the endless roll of the dead. I remained. They gave me responsibilities that came with seniority. I trained new recruits in the arts of Xenos hunting, teaching them what the Codex Astartes could not, how to fight creatures that broke every rule of conventional warfare. I led missions when younger watch captains needed veterans who knew how to bring warriors home alive. I stood in the Chapel of Fallen Heroes and delivered blessings over brothers whose names I would forget within a year, because forgetting was the only way to survive the weight of so much death. I watched the painting rituals in the Apothecarian countless times. Crimson to black, blue to black, green to black, gold to black. Every color of every chapter gradually erased, leaving only the obsidian of the long vigil. Sometimes the brothers being painted wept silently. Sometimes they maintained stoic silence. Sometimes they asked me questions I could not answer. Will I return? Will I survive? Will I remember who I was? I told them what Valen never told me. What I wish someone had told me in that first moment of trembling uncertainty. The Deathwatch will consume you. Mission by mission, year by year, it will burn away everything you were and remake you into something that serves only one purpose: the protection of humanity from Xenos threat. You will forget your chapter's rituals. You will forget your brothers' faces. You will forget the man you were before you wore the black. And when you finally fall, you will fall knowing that your sacrifice bought humanity one more day. That is all. That is everything. Some understood, most did not. Not yet. My left pauldron became more bare ceramite than paint as the years accumulated. The Crimson Warden's iconography, those crossed blades over a golden sun, faded to the point of near invisibility. Sometimes I would trace the outline with my fingertips, trying to remember what it had looked like new, trying to remember the pride I had felt wearing those colors. The memories came harder each year, like trying to recall a dream upon waking. The message arrived in my 123rd year of service. A priority communication from the Administratum, encrypted with codes that suggested finality. Be it known that the Crimson Wardens chapter, first founding successor of the Imperial Fists, has been declared extinct. The chapter's fortress monastery on Viridia was destroyed in the Chaos Incursion of 976.M41. All Battle Brothers confirmed lost. Gene seed stocks destroyed. Chapter relics unrecoverable. By order of the High Lords of Terror, the Crimson Wardens are struck from the rolls of active chapters and consigned to the annals of honored dead. I read the message 3 times. Then I deleted it and returned to cleaning my bolter. I should have felt something. Grief, rage, loss, the extinction of my chapter. 10,000 years of history erased. The fortress monastery where I had been forged into a space marine reduced to rubble. Every brother I had ever known, dead or corrupted. It should have hollowed me out. It should have broken something essential inside me. But I felt nothing. Or perhaps I felt a kind of distant acknowledgement, the way one might note a fact in a tactical report. The Crimson Wardens were extinct. I was the last, and I had already mourned them. I had been mourning them for a century. That night, I walked to the Chapel of Fallen Heroes. The chamber was empty at this hour, lit only by candles that burned before the altar where the Deathwatch's most sacred relics were kept. I knelt before those relics and tried to pray, but the words would not come. What was there to pray for? Who was left to pray to? I rose and walked to the armory. My armor hung on its rack, black as the void between stars, silver trim gleaming in the dim lumens. I had worn this armor longer than I had worn anything else in my existence. It had become my skin, my identity, the only truth I knew. I removed my left pauldron from the armor rack. The crimson was barely visible now, buried beneath decades of scars and damage. The crossed blades of my chapter were ghosts, suggestions of symbols that had once meant everything to me. I carried the pauldron to one of the painting stations. No tech priests attended at this hour, no servo skulls observed. Just me and the paint and the final severance. I took up a brush, dipped it in the deepest black enamel, and began to paint. Stroke by stroke, I erased the last trace of crimson. The crossed blades disappeared beneath obsidian. The golden sun faded into shadow. The ghost of what I had been vanished into the darkness of what I had become. There was no ceremony, no witnesses, no prayers or litanies to mark the moment. Just the soft sound of bristles on ceramite and the quiet hum of the fortress around me. When I finished, I held the pauldron up to the light. Completely black, utterly dark. No trace remained of the Crimson Wardens, of Viridia, of the man I had been 147 years ago when I first held black ceramite in trembling hands. My hands did not tremble now. I attached the pauldron back to my armor, both shoulders black, both arms tools of the Imperium. Nothing remained of Brother Sergeant Matthias Kane of the 3rd Company, Crimson Wardens. He was extinct, like his chapter, like everything he had been. Only Deathwatch remained. I stood in the armory, looking at my reflection in a polished section of wall. The warrior staring back at me was ancient, scarred, utterly without mercy. His eyes held the weight of a century and a half of Xenos hunting. His face bore the marks of wounds that would have killed lesser men. His armor was a testament to survival through sheer, brutal endurance. He was a weapon. He was the vigil. He was the black. And he was complete. I turned from my reflection and walked back into the fortress. There were always more missions, always more Xenos, always more brothers arriving with fear in their eyes and colors on their shoulders. The wheel would turn. The Deathwatch would endure, and I would stand watch until the aliens were defeated, or until there was nothing left of me but black armor and duty. This is what happens when you are sent to the Deathwatch. You become the weapon. You become the vigil. You become the black. And when everything else is stripped away, your chapter, your brothers, your past, your identity, you discover that the black is enough. It has to be, because there is nothing else left.